It's funny in a way. I swore I'd never be one of those people who jump to something so permanent, but here I am, staring into the bedroom mirror. It never got mounted properly, and I just sort of leaned it against the top of the dresser. Regardless, my eyes slowly met their doppelganger in the reflection. It's not me, not in any sense that I can register, yet all I can think of is the taste of pennies. Now my mind flashed back to when I was around 9 years old. A friend of mine bet that I couldn't fit a whole roll of pennies in my mouth. I collected from that bet 50 cents in the old gush, and it earned me $3 bills. I almost laughed about the peculiar memory, but I caught myself. It's odd how closely emotions can follow one another. Just as soon as I choke back my humor, tears begin to stream down my cheeks. How in the hell did I get here? I slipped the barrel from between my lips and let it rest on the side of the bed. At the exact moment the heavy chunk of metal hit the blanket, a loud thud hit the bedroom door. One way or another, I mumbled to myself. Then I looked up again to find half a smirk on my face. It's sort of funny how we find ourselves not caring anymore when backed into a corner, and when all options are taken away from you, another clash at the door. It's locked, but that won't hold them back for long, and now all I can think of is Tara. 3 days ago, she was still here, and I wanted nothing more than just to get away from her. See, we had been together for over 2 years, and well beyond the point of repair. She had cheated once, and I had cheated in return. The rubber match went to her, making the final score 2-1. I had found out from a mutual friend of ours, and she didn't even try to deny it, once confronted. Sitting there on the bed now, it seemed so stupid. We were both way too damn young to be in a relationship in the first place. Your 20s are a feed mill, boy, my uncle had once told me several times before. Oats and seed, sowing one and spreading the other. They never failed to make me laugh, and I could see in the mirror this was true even now. I was brought back to reality by another bang on the bedroom door. This place always had good solid doors. Gonna have to try harder than that, I yelled at them. At nothing. At whatever the hell they were. 3 days ago. I woke up on the couch and squinted my eyes enough to look at the clock across the room. 4:15. The light from the kitchen was blinding, but I followed it. My throat was still sore from screaming back and forth, and my body did not even want to move. A little too brief of a nap, separating the arguments of a few hours ago, with the one surely coming when I rounded the corner to the kitchen. I was still a bit pissed, but slightly relieved to find no one in the brightness of the illuminated kitchen. I really needed a rest after all the bullshit that we had thrown at each other just a few hours before, but I was up now. Suddenly, there was the sound of creaking wood to my left, so I went down the tiny hallway to see that the front door was flung open. What the hell, Tara? We didn't live in the worst neighborhood in the world, but you don't just leave doors flung open like that. Wide open was a stretch. It was cracked open about 5 inches maybe, but the principle still stands. You don't just leave the door unlocked and open while you sleep. Except with the light on and the door left open meant that she had already departed for the day. So, she couldn't give less of a damn about my safety. The porch was very dimly lit. I barely recognized anything through the blanket of darkness outside, save for my barbecue and the pale yellow of the storage containers next to it that held all manner of crap I didn't feel like putting in the house. Yard stuff, as I phrased it to a friend once. Beyond the porch, in the yard, I heard a sudden pronounced rustling. Reaching back onto the shelf in the hall, I snatched up the cheap blue flashlight, crept out onto the cold wood of the deck, and shined the light across the yard. Nothing. Not a peep. As I turned around to head back inside, there was a noise back out in the yard. This noise was not animal, and most assuredly not of a human origin. The only noise I could liken it to would be the groan of an empty stomach, only far more guttural. The rustling started again and began shuffling across the yard. Immediately I turned around and dashed back into the house, but I heard a shriek come from inside. Just down the hallway, a silhouette stood in the kitchen. It seemed surreal to me at the time that the light of the kitchen only caught this shape, and not the clothing, nor the face of my intruder. Just a shadow. But before I had another second to question, the groan that had been at my back was now mere footsteps away. I caught the glimpse of a shadow, and a dim green glow as I bounded down the steps and raced across the driveway. I started running and had no intention of stopping until I heard another groan coming from the house. No, not a groan. A scream. It was Tara. She was still in the house. I debated with myself, finally jogging back until I saw a figure in the darkness, a shape not fully distinguishable through the fading night sky, and then I saw it coming up the hill in my direction. Well, I saw something. 2 narrow beams of light, eyes. They glowed, and all I could make out was a shadow in the form of a person, only vaguely though. The moon still shone down, yet I still saw no clothing or facial features hatch in the glimmer of night. Only the dull green glow heading in my direction. Another scream came down from the house. Internally, I struggled with myself. I even stepped forward against my better judgment until I heard another groan coming from the shadow just ahead. I took off running further up the hill away from the house. The closest neighbor was Mr. Kramer, about 1/4 of a mile down the road. My chest felt like it was out in front of me, and I cursed being so out of shape. Cursing my smokes probably laying on the coffee table next to the couch from which I had slept. Tara always said how I relied on my smokes, how I would pass out if I had ever had to run anywhere. Not too far from the truth, was she? How far can one little house be, for Christ's sakes? I had almost made it before I heard something in the distance behind me, not the groan of my pursuers. Further away, fleeting, a desperate proclamation. It echoed through the trees, in the distance. I knew it was Tara, begging from the house down the hill, screaming for me. She was trying to yell, "John!" but had gotten snuffed out in the evening breeze. From the light now behind me, I heard a familiar, if not infuriating voice bellow, "Who are you, you sumbitches? State your business or I'm gonna start firing buckshot at your ass." Mr. Kramer had spouted from his porch. If ever there was an ordinary old man who lived, Mr. Kramer would perfectly fit the mold. When Tara and I had started moving into our place, we had been driving by his and saw him digging in his yard, repairing a fence. From what it looked to me, I had slowed my truck and waved at him, just being neighborly. He had wiped his hands, looked my way with his grizzled old brow and matching hair before he set back to work. He lifted his eyes before muttering to us, "Don't bother asking to borrow shit, 'cause I ain't lending." To hell with all of that now that I thought of it, and jumped the ditch, landing on the side of his house. As I made my way across the front of his yard, my face met with the barrel of the biggest gun I'd ever seen. Mr. Kramer looked furious at the other end. "That you from down the road, boy?" "Yes, Mr. Kramer, it's John from down the hill." I managed to stutter out the sentence through the shock of having a gun in my face for the first time. "So you and your friends here to rob me, is that it?" My friends? "Yeah, your friends." He gestured with a gun in his hands toward the front of his yard. Through the forest beyond, you could see 6 pale green lights coming down the embankment, straight to his property. I tried to explain that those were not my friends, and that I had run up the hill to his place trying to get away from them. I don't remember the exact words I used, and by this point I think my mind had left me for a while. In whatever manner the words left me, they must have struck a chord. Mr. Kramer told me to get inside, and he closed the area between himself and his doorway. I took one more look as I basically fell into his living room, and saw the green glow closing in on the porch. The slam of his front door felt like a brief and momentary reprieve. The drop of water in the scorches of hell. He began asking whether I would enlighten him as to what the hell was going on, and I again stuttered through what I had witnessed that morning. He pointed out that it was now a few minutes until 6, and that daylight wasn't too far behind it. I wasn't sure whether that meant anything, and I know now. It absolutely means nothing. The digital clock on the wall had the time and date. November 13th, 5:53 a.m. They blurred for a few moments, and all I heard was the sound. Shh. My eyes blurred again, then closed altogether. A stiff feeling awakened me from what must have been exhaustion, and I realized that Mr. Kramer had cracked me in the back of the head with the butt of his gun. Not hard enough to hurt, just enough to get my eyes open again. "Wake up, you dumbass!" I thought I had been dreaming, and hoped for it at least. But that was not the case. Mr. Kramer was rubbing his eyes. He must have passed out as well. With a threat literally right at your doorstep, it seemed stupid to just fall asleep. No longer had I even finished this thought before Mr. Kramer had cocked his gun and opened his door. It felt like slow motion as I leaped towards the light of the day. It had been mid-afternoon. How long had we been asleep? I looked over at the clock. 11:13, 6:39 p.m. Over 12 hours had passed. I remembered the sound of steam or of someone slowly shushing you. Could that actually have put us to sleep? Mr. Kramer told me to come over to him, and when I did, it took a moment to adjust to the sun. He pointed downward, and I saw what looked like piles of dirt on his porch. 4 little piles of dirt, nothing else. He pushed one of them around with his gun, then knelt down to pinch a bit between his fingers. Ain't nothing but soot. Just ashes is all. As he turned around to tell this to me, I noticed one of these piles move. It flattened, and a shape grew out of it, a shadow, only it had more shape than just a shadow. A long, gaunt, and blackened figure emerged from the pile of soot. At that moment, Mr. Kramer shot at the thing, and the racket was deafening. The figure lit up like the brightest sunlight you'd ever seen. But then it began to darken once more. Mr. Kramer tried to reload his gun, but that thing, the shadow person, it stepped right in front of him. He froze as it loomed over him. It put its arms over his shoulders. For a brief moment, it looked as if it was congratulating him for some great feat that he had done. Then, in one swift motion, it twisted his head until Mr. Kramer was facing back towards me again. The dark figure put its claw-like fingers on top of his brow and pulled. It pulled. It pulled his goddamn head off. I could see Mr. Kramer's head and spine still attached as it wriggled in the beaming sun. The shadow man brought the head as though peering into its eyes. With the other hand, he made a sweeping motion, and Mr. Kramer broke into a charred pile in front of me. The head that the figure had held in his hands crumpled into nothing. The 3 piles of ash behind the thing began to flatten and form. So I took off running. I passed by several mounds of soot before making it to the main road. The shadowy figures greeted me there. I cut through the woods and ended up falling down into a gully. Scratched up and bloody, I made my way back to the only structure I could find, a shed in the forest just outside of my property. There were no holes in the floor, and the door was secure for such an old building. The sun was starting to go down. Just as I tried to figure out what to do next, I heard it again. That shushing sound. With the dark, they were becoming strong once again. I don't know how I knew this, but I did. I fought it for quite some time, but after a while I felt my eyes close, and I was gone. I woke up to sunlight beaming through the top of the door. The hinges of the door were almost bent all the way down. I don't know how long I had been out, but if it was like the last time, it was damn near the whole day. The second full day that the world had went to hell, or to the shadows at least. I peeked out the door, and after daring myself to do so for close to an hour, there were 9 piles of the grayest ash just sitting in a row around the shed. I took 2 or 3 steps backwards, and then launched myself to jump over them. I was heading to the house when that all-too-familiar groan beckoned me. I sprinted back through the yard and up to my driveway. Groaning followed through the woods. My chest burned, a lick of flame from my heart deep down into my guts. The last place I wanted to be was back there. They want me here, I whispered to myself, and I knew it was true. They blocked every other path, and now I was back home, but I knew I'd never feel home again. The kitchen light was still on, and I sprinted through the halls towards the bedroom door. I almost made it there, too, until I saw the guest bathroom that was on the left. Charred black remains were clumped on the floor, and in front of the heap, the shape of a head. Tara's face, even though burnt beyond recognition, was frozen in one final scream of agony. I hated myself in that moment. Knowing what I do now, I couldn't have saved her, but at least I could have tried. Survivor's guilt. Or a coward's regret. It's not my place to say. I slammed the bedroom door and locked it behind me. The only firearm I ever owned lay in my nightstand next to our bed. Seeing what damage Mr. Kramer's gun did to those bastards, the feeling of safety did not come to me when I lifted the weighty hunk of metal. An eerie moment of silence and the inescapable feeling of the inevitability permeated everything. The rest is epidemic. They lulled me back to sleep once they made it into the house. I woke up the last time, I guess, about 2 hours ago. They say your life's supposed to flash before your eyes, but mine are full of nothing. At 23 years old, I'm standing at the edge of the world, looking over the plateau. I take one last look in the mirror, one final peek at humanity. Even after staring for several minutes, I still don't see it in me. I hear a tapping behind me and look over to see the screws falling from the door hinges. They groan at me, savoring the moments to come. My fear, my humanity, they want so badly to consume me. It will not be long. My uncle always, with a simple way to explain a monumental issue, echoed in my head. Johnny boy, if you're ever concerned in life, just remember this. When caught in a trap, A fox will chew off its own leg to get free. I remember looking at him as though he was nuts. He must have caught that glance too, because he continued. If that one doesn't help you, this one will. My neighbor used to beat his dog all the time. I yelled over to him to leave that damn dog alone. But he just shot me the bird. One day he hit it so hard it just kneeled over and died. But not before shitting all over the guy's pants and shoes. Get me? And at that age, I felt bad for the dog, but I laughed anyways. I get what he was saying though. He'd never let him win. Not even a little. I smile one more time, not for me, but for everyone I've ever loved. So one more time, I taste the pennies. I close my eyes. And after a few minutes, I don't taste anything.